All right, 1, 2, 3. Welcome to the Oregon Grape. I am Eli Doyle. We are joined in the studio by your mayor, if you live in Grants Pass, Clint Scherf. Welcome, Clint.
Thank you, sir.
So listen, like I said, we don't really set agendas for these. I just want to talk to you, let the people get to know you, and if you have some issues you want to go over, then we can do that. But I did kind of have one opening question, which was basically just like, what is the experience been? It's been about a month now, right, that you've been, kind of actively working in office. And so what is like, I guess what I want to ask is like, what was your perception of the office of mayor versus like what your now experience has been doing it for a month?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little background. So I basically, when I relocated back to Grants Pass here in 2017, I think it was, I thought I could help the city out a little bit. And I'm a civil engineer by trade, so I utilize building code, municipal code throughout my industry. And so I was like, well, the building code's a little antiquated here. So I got involved with the city in the UAPC, which is the Urban Planning Commission, served on that committee for a little bit, and then there was an opening for a council position. And so in 2018, 2019, I actually became a councilor.
Oh, you did? You were a councilor for a while.
So I sat on the council for a couple.
Shows how much I paid attention to what was going on back then.
That's okay. And so I did have some direct knowledge of like working with the mayor and working with the city and stuff, and then sitting up there and getting berated by the community a little bit and stuff.
That had to be an interesting learning experience.
Yeah, it was okay. I definitely have a pretty thick skin, so it's okay. And I like to debate, so that was kind of fun for me. And so basically, I did try to get back into the council position, throughout the years, and I didn't make it. How
long is the term for a council member?
So the first term that I did was 2 years because I kind of went right in the middle of the cycle. And then a normal term is 4 years. And so when I tried to get back in after my first 2 years was done, I went up against Rob Pell. Okay. And so if you remember, I was the counselor that lost to Rob Pell by 8 votes. So there was a recount and all that stuff.
Close.
Yep, it was so basically he got voted in for Ward 1, which is the northwest section of the town. And he got voted in by 8 extra votes. And we joke about it. I mean, we both are pretty good guys and we joke about it all the time. But so I lost that, and then this next round, I kind of followed council meetings, went to council meetings, and I'd have community actually reach out to me and say, hey, we don't like what the current council's doing. Can you come to the council meeting and fight for us? So I actually got so involved with the community and people that would come to me and ask me to come help and be their voice. So when the next election came around this last time in November, the community came out again and said, hey, we've got a counselor for Ward 1, which is your ward, but we want you to be mayor. And I said, okay.
So you were kind of put up to this. You were kind of requested from some folks.
I was community members, business leaders, and so forth that I had kind of worked with in previous campaigns and through my experience with previous council stuff. And it's like, we like what you do. We like that you ask a lot of questions, and we want you to represent us. And I think that was kind of part of my success in actually winning as well, is the fact that I was ingrained with a lot for the people in the community, and I was.
It's always easier if you're a familiar face and you have a bit of a record and stuff. Both for me and for the audience, can you explain a little bit of difference of some of the responsibilities of a council member versus the actual mayor? Sure.
So you have a council members of 8 people. And that council, they actually put together the resolutions, the ordinances, and they actually vote, and they have the judicial power. Okay. So they have the voting power. Now, the mayor is kind of like what I consider the captain of the ship. Okay. So the mayor sets the agenda. So the mayor basically would say, hey, we've got 10 things we want to work on this year. And so then I'm going to be, throughout the year, I'm going to be coordinating and trying to get those items on the agenda and steer the council in those directions. So you do get
to kind of instruct the council members on the direction you want them to take.
Correct. I have a lot of influence on that. I don't have the judicial power to basically vote. So
kind of a congressional executive on a lower scale.
Yeah, in layman's term, I put it like I'm the emblem on the end of the car.
Okay, nice.
The handshaker and the guy the guy that's the pretty face on the milk carton. But so basically, since there's 8 counselors and there's a tie vote, the mayor would break the tie vote. Mm-hmm. I do have the ability to have veto power. Okay. So with the mayor, you kind of have to come up with. It's written in the charter. It's a little bit vague, but you should, if you're going to veto a vote, you should have a good reasoning. You should be able to, project that reasoning and explain that.
To articulate it and should be able to make
exactly.
sense. Yeah.
That's a better word. Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So that you do have that power. So if you do remember back maybe a year and a half ago, the previous mayor, Sarah Bristol, she actually vetoed a controversial item where the council was putting a resolution together that said, if you were a nonprofit and you were going to go into the parks and you were going to service the homeless, that we wanted you to come to the city first, write your name on a piece of paper, and pay $5. So basically the city could track who was coming in and who was coming out and so forth.
Why was that important to them? Was this something Sarah Bristol was in favor of?
No, she actually vetoed it.
She vetoed it.
It actually passed. It passed. I don't think it passed unanimously, but it passed a majority within the council.
Okay.
And then Sarah Bristol vetoed it. And it was kind of questionable why.
Yeah.
Because realistically, it wasn't the monetary value, but it was more of like the city was kind of saying, we don't have accountability for a nonprofit to go in there and give a bunch of pizzas to people, and then who's going to clean up all the pizza boxes and so forth. It was as simplistic as that.
Oh, okay.
And so they wanted a little bit more accountability, and for some reason she vetoed it. And what happens is when you vote on a resolution or an ordinance, and it passes or it fails, or if it passes, then the mayor has 3 days to say, well, I want to veto it or not. So if the mayor vetoes it, then it has to go back through another cycle. It has to go back through and be voted on again. And I think that specific resolution, she vetoed it twice.
Interesting.
And it was wild because it was just, if you're a nonprofit, please come to the city and sign up and, pay $5.
Yeah.
And it was just so the city could track who was going in there. So if something went super awry, like I said, there was a bunch of pizza boxes all over. They could call, for example, like UCAN or something and say, hey, you know what, you were last there. Did you, did you blah, blah, blah.
What an interesting thing to veto. But
it was very weird. And it was very controversial. So the veto power is one thing that the mayor has in the arsenal, but I truly take it on as you have to be very justified in using it, and it shouldn't be used lightly. And so forth.
I imagine like it would just be like it would look bad on you as a governor.
Well, I would think you could use it as an abuse of power. You could argue the abuse of power.
Yeah.
And so basically, I look at it like you're kind of the captain of the ship. You're kind of steering everybody in the direction you want to go.
But they make executive orders like the president. Can you say like Ice Cream Wednesday's executive order,
No, there's things that we can, as a council body, we can dedicate things. Like it's like... It's Ice Cream Wednesday or something, and we can put an official letter that gets recorded.
Because when I run for mayor, that's like day one, right there.
Here's the crazy part is people don't realize we are one of the only cities in Oregon that does not pay our counselors and does not pay.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, if that was common. Yeah.
So you have 8 counselors and you have 1 mayor. They are volunteer, unpaid positions.
Yeah.
And yes, they are voted in by the community. But we do get lunch.
Yeah.
Here and there we get coffee, we get stuff like that.
Maybe per diem if you go on a trip or something. Yeah.
I think if you do some educational stuff, you can get like they'll pay for your hotel if you got to go up to the Capitol and do some training and stuff like that. But that's no fee whatsoever, and it's kind of wild.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is like one of the thoughts I've had on paying public servants is I was basically saying that the wage should be, or the salary should be minimum, because I would like to think that as a public servant, you don't want that to be motivated by
absolutely.
money. But then as I thought a little bit deeper, I was like, the way that these people are making money, if that is what they're in it for, is not through their salary. It's through the influence that they can inflict. That's why you can make a lot of money by following Nancy Pelosi's stock trading record or whatever. Exactly. So it's like, I guess when I'm thinking about us being an unpaid for mayor and city and for the city council members, what do you think are the pros and cons of that?
Well, basically, the cons are the fact that you have...
The con is you don't get an extra vacation this year. But, no.
Exactly. And realistically, that's why you get people that are retired.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I personally have a full-time job. I have a family support. I'm a small business owner, so I do have latitude to kind of, work when I need to work. A little bit of freedom there, yeah. Yeah, but you spend at least 2 Mondays a month, and there's a 2-hour minimum workshop every 2 Mondays, so that's 4 hours. And then you have 2 council meetings, 2 Wednesdays, and they're a minimum of 2 hours. Sometimes they go 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
Then there's various items in the middle that you do. So realistically, it does take about, roughly a work week every month and a half.
Okay. Yeah.
So it does. You do have people that come in that are retired that do it because they have extra time and everything.
Yeah.
The one negative part of that being retired is you kind of do get out of touch with the community and in the business side and the family side of the community because you're not still in that anymore. But that's not to say that's negative because all the people that do serve right now are just amazing, dedicated to this city. Yeah. Amazing passion for the community.
Are most of them working people as well? Because I know, who's the fellow that works with Andy? At the mill?
Oh, yeah. So Eric.
Eric
has Eric has a full-time job.
So he's doing a full-time job as well, yeah.
And then I think Kathleen, she's been involved in drug and alcohol treatment.
Oh, okay.
And I believe she works either part-time or full-time.
So would you say most of the city council members are working as well?
So you have Rob Pell, who owns the Herb Shop downtown on H Street. And he is, he's a small business owner, so he's very dedicated to that. So definitely. He's working 90% of the time. Joel and Rick, who are two older council members, they're both retired.
Okay.
Victoria, I think she's retired. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so I think that's and Indra. So Indra's one of the new ones too. She owns Udders, the ice cream shop uptown.
Oh, really?
Yep. So
great ice cream.
Yep. She's a small business
owner. We could use that
so,
for Ice Cream Wednesdays. We already have our Ice Cream Wednesdays vendor.
There you go.
You
do definitely.
Well, one of the positives that I'm seeing of it being an unpaid position, if you want to call it a positive, is that these are all people who are still actively working as part of the community, so they're very in touch. Kind of like you were saying, the retired people. Maybe I don't know if this is what you're saying, but maybe a little less in touch with what's going on. Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is the new council members that came up, the 4 new of them, they have a pulse on, like it said, one of them has been a drug and alcohol counselor for 13 plus years. Yeah. So you have that expertise on it. You've got a military background on one side of it. You've got business owners on a couple of it with that. And so you do, our fingers are in the meat of the
community. Fairly diverse group there, yeah.
And they bring a lot of, I think everybody brings their own amount of experience.
Absolutely, yeah.
I take it back to, if you go back and go to civics history, right? These political positions were founded as being a service. Mm-hmm. I mean, our founding fathers put the Constitution together as this was a service.
Yeah.
And so it could have been a volunteered, unpaid position at the very beginning, but it's evolved from that. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go, we can go in a conversation for hours about how bad the federal political system is.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Some of the stuff they found through that DOGE program, we don't got to go into all the national politics, but some of the stuff they found in that DOGE program that they were spending money on, it was like, a Sesame Street program in Afghanistan or something. It's like, what? Why am I paying for that? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. Like, if you actually break it down of all you take out the projects and you just go and say, hey, how much does a senator make, right?
Yeah.
Senator makes I think it's $170,000 a year.
Okay.
So a senator makes that's their base salary. They get the best medical. They get Secret Service. They get stipends.
Yeah.
They get housing.
So as far as actual investment in them.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So then what happens is if you're a senator, specifically, because I did this research because I was just fascinated by it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're a senator and you say, hey, I want to be on a committee, if you serve on a committee, you get an additional $25,000 just to serve on that committee. If you're a chairman of that committee or a vice chair, you can get $50,000 to $100,000.
Interesting.
And there's no limit on how many committees you can serve on.
You're kidding.
Nope. So if you were
that actually explains a lot, because I feel like there's some like bonkers committees that's like, what are you doing? Yeah.
So if you wanted to be like Pauly Shore, like old school Pauly Shore, right? So I'm going to be a senator. I'm going to pull on this, and then I'm going to be in 25 different committees, but I'm not going to do anything. That's 25 times $25,000 plus another $170,000.
Yeah.
That's why they make so much money. And then you get speaking engagements and all that stuff. So even just the base salary can be expanded so much. And I don't think if I didn't even learn this till I just did Google search because I was interested one day, right? So it's kind of crazy. I think the community people should be involved no matter what. Like that government, our small community government, all they do is use your taxpayer money. Mm-hmm. We don't make money. Government never makes money.
Yeah.
Government just spends money.
Yeah.
And if I can impart on any parent, you need to teach your kids that.
Oh yeah,
Teach your kids that.
Oh, I've been saying that forever. Anytime you hear like some like college kid saying like, "Hey, the government should pay for this for me," it's like you realize you're asking like your neighbor Bob to pay for that. The government doesn't generate income apart from taxation, you know, and whatever, maybe some programs or things, but generally basically taxation. So yeah, that's interesting. No, and it's a very important lesson.
Yeah, and it's wild because when you get certain people that are in the media or whatever that you hear on some news station, they're like, they're interviewing somebody and they're like, well, yeah, the government should pay for that.
Yeah.
And you're like, they have no clue on how the government actually works.
Yeah.
Because the government makes no money.
No. I've always said, like, anytime you're asking yourself, should the government pay for this item or that item, ask if your neighbor should be paying for it for you, because that's what's actually happening, So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. So so you've got a month into your belt in this. Why were you encouraged to run for mayor, like on a personal level? Like, what did you want to see change? Because I know you said you had some people encouraging you to do it.
Yeah. So the crazy part is I do have that weird story.
Yeah.
So when I
this is the place to tell it, man.
So
spill the tea, brother. No,
everybody's heard my story too. Like, I was born and raised here. My dad was born and raised here. I'm raised in the fourth generation of my surname here.
Okay.
When I got out of college, so I went to school here, and when I got out of college, there was no jobs here. Mm-hmm. So I had to relocate to Arizona. I went to Arizona for like 18 years, raised my family, and then brought them back here in about 2017 because I wanted my kids to grow up like I did.
Yeah. It's a lovely town to grow up in.
And at that point, I was like, hey, you know what? I want to help the city because I want to be involved in development. So I started out with the Urban Planning Commission. And Dan Fowler was the mayor at that time. Okay. So Dan Fowler says, hey, I want to be a county commissioner. So Dan Fowler left the mayor position and went to be a county commissioner. What that does is that was in the middle of a voting cycle. Mm-hmm. So what they did is they said, hey, we're going to put an application process out to be mayor. I signed up immediately.
Yeah.
So back in 2017, I think it was 2018.
Why so quick? Why was it no need to consider?
Oh, because it was fun. Like, I was just like, you know what? Hey, there's a bucket list, man. Like, I was fascinated with politics, and I'm like, why not? What better to put on my resume as I was born and raised in this town, and I ended up dying being the mayor.
Yeah.
Back then I signed up to be the mayor, and the council did a very good choice. They said, well, this council member was voted in by the public, so we're going to take one of the council members and we're going to push him up to mayor position.
Oh, okay.
And then what happened was that councilor was actually in my Ward 1. And so then I did another application process for that counselor, and basically,
is that when you got on the?
So that's how I got to be a counselor.
Yeah.
And so the next opportunity I got to be when the mayor position came up, I was like, yeah, it was a no-brainer when the community asked me to do it. I was like, heck
absolutely. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Because it was back in the day, and back in 2018, it was a whim. It was like, wouldn't that be cool to put on your resume?
Yeah. Sometimes those are like the ambitions or the projects that work out the best is where you're just like, no, that feels good. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try for that.
Yeah. Oh, and I love this town, and it's like it's different. I think when you have so much lineage in this town, and it's like
the passion there.
Yeah,
for the town.
It is the passion.
I was born and raised here too. I feel the same way.
Your roots are deep.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of crazy. So like that's the main reason. It was just like I was passionate about it. And I thought it was great, and it's been fun so far.
So I know that there was so I would say that just from what I've kind of absorbed from news outlets and hearsay things is that it seems as if this council has some unity as far as the direction that they want to take the city. So would you say that there was a part of this also where you maybe had some differences in the way that the former council and the former mayor were running things? Were there some things where you wanted to take it in a different direction? Was that also part of the motivation?
Yeah, no, it was definitely part of the motivation because just being involved in the city for so long and I, for the 4 years that I sat on the sidelines, I still was involved in the council meetings. I still watched them. I was still really good friends with a lot of the people. I served with Rick Riker, who is currently on there. I served with Joel, who was currently on there. I mean, we're still friends.
Yeah.
Like I was friends with Dwayne because, and DJ. Remember DJ was on it. I mean, we were really good friends. And you get that camaraderie. And so I kind of followed them and I saw that the feeling that I got over the last 4 years was there was a major split divide down the middle. So there was half the council that didn't even want to talk to the other half of the council. And it was so prevalent that you could see it in the council meetings and in the public meetings.
There's some real enmity happening there.
Absolutely. And so it was just the fact that when you can't get along with your partner next to you shoulder to shoulder, then you're not going to get things done.
Less is going to get done.
So absolutely. I think the community got a feel of it's just been stagnant and they hadn't done anything for 4 years. And so my campaign, I actually ran with the 4 councilors that won. And basically our premise was, you want change, we're going to bring change.
Yeah.
And that's basically was our slogan. It's like, we're going to bring change. Don't know if we're going to fix everything, but we're going to bring a different change. And now we all have a very conservative outlook on things.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. And I believe that the majority of the registered voters here in Grants Pass are of a conservative nature.
Yeah, what is it, like a little over 60% is kind of what they say. Yeah.
And so it's kind of wild because if you look at the conservative people within Grants Pass or even at Josephine County as a whole, right, this is a working class community.
Yeah.
90% of us are working class people, have been working class people. And so it's like you have those strong moral roots is what I want to call it. And so basically I think the community saw that it was going in a bad direction.
Yeah.
So we can change that around. And yes, I do think we have a lot of continuity between myself and the 4 new people.
Yeah.
As well as a couple of the older council members that are on the staff too. So yeah, I think you're going to see there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be some growing pains with us and the people that have been there for a little while. So but I believe we're all going to be kind of, and we don't have to get along. You need to have independent voices, independent thinking. But I think we're all at least going to be friendly and going to get along and have decorum. And basically everybody has
less tension around the water cooler.
Yes. Yeah. And I believe, I don't speak for anybody, but I believe that everybody that sits up on that dais has utmost passion for this community.
Yeah.
And does want to do nothing but good for this community.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you talked about some changes that you would have liked to have seen, and that was part of the motivation. Would you like to highlight some of those changes? What were some things that you wanted to see change?
So basically, I'm a developer by basically trade. I help people develop. I'm a civil engineer by trade, so I work with land developers and we develop land and stuff like that. I see Grants Pass as being very stagnant since the 80s.
Yeah.
When I grew up
Why
here...
Why the 80s?
So when I grew up here, it was... you had loggers, you had farmers and ranchers, you had business people, and then we had the hippie culture. The hippie culture were the transient people that kind of went in and out and everything, and everybody got along. Everybody got along. But that middle class was strong. So you had that manufacturing style, non-college educated, working class, middle class there. The spotted owl was a major environmental controversy back in the late 80s.
That bastard.
Yep.
Heard too much of him. No. Yep. Sorry.
It's a very stringy meat, too.
Yeah,
it's not very good.
Oh, man.
So basically, that was the downfall of the lumber industry.
Yeah.
Oregon's heartbeat was the lumber industry and still is the lumber industry, but it's not there. So basically, Grants Pass, they lost that manufacturing style, non-college educated, middle class job market, and it's never come back. I mean, think about it. Spalding Industrial Park has been vacant since the 90s.
Yeah.
And like we've never filled that back up. You have a town that sits right off of I-5, Interstate 5, that goes from all the way down to Mexico to all the way to Canada. You have railroads that go right through the middle of our town. And then we also have the beautiful environment like the rivers and the mountains and everything. So we are prime for industrial manufacturing style employment.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And so that's what I want to bring. I want to bring the change. I want to push economic development. I want us to be shouting from the top of the tallest building we can to get people to come here and say, you got a beautiful town. I want to put a little manufacturing plant here, and I want to employ 200 people.
Well, I'm really glad that we reached that kind of topic there, because I've always thought that when you solve economic problems, a lot of other problems naturally go away. You know, it's sort of like kind of like we were talking about the government paying for things or whatever. If you are asking yourself, like, like what I say is you should not be asking yourself, should the government be paying for this for me? You should be asking yourself, why can't I afford this myself?
Absolutely.
You know, because it's always better if you do it private, right? It's always better quality. You know, it's always better bang for your buck. So I believe Josephine County, I don't know how recent this statistic is or whatever, but I believe Josephine County was named as like the third poorest out of, I think it's 36 counties in Oregon River. We're a pretty poor county, just to be honest. You know, our mayor doesn't even get a paycheck. You know,
exactly.
So like,
Exactly.
But what I was thinking about is like, again, not to take this on a national scale, but I feel like part of the popularity of like the tariff idea, right? So apparently like we used to generate almost all of our income from tariffs as opposed to income tax, right? So the popularity of the tariff is that you can, like a 5-year-old can understand if you're buying all these goods from overseas, you know, you're shopping at another country for your goods, slowly your money is going to start to dissipate. You're going to end up in a deficit, right? And so I was thinking on a local scale, it's the same principle, you know? And so it really only takes a few good industries exporting to other counties or to other states, right? You know, to suddenly lift you out of that poverty range, you know? And so I'm sure that's something you're thinking of, but I'd love to hear more about, what your ideas are.
It's gonna go full circle back to, and I know I piss a lot of people off when I say this.
Yeah.
The topic for the last how many years has been affordable housing.
Yeah.
Like affordable housing. And it makes me mad because it has nothing to do with affordable housing. It has to do with affordability. The fact that you don't have a good paying job means that you can't afford a house. I believe in my whole heart that anybody can go out and buy a house.
Isn't it true that our housing prices are much higher than other states, though?
It's absolutely not.
Oh, it's not?
It's not. I mean, I do a lot of my work in Arizona. My business is completely solely in Arizona. The beauty of the internet allows me to live here and do all my work in Arizona. So it's crazy. I take money from Arizona and I spend it in Oregon. Yeah. And it's kind of
that's
like...
That's what I'm talking about, you know? Exactly. That's what we need, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So what it is if you look at the price per square foot, that's what people talk about. You have to look at it in the whole scale of your economic base. So economic base is defined as like what your job base is, what your take home pay is. What's your medium take home pay is, right? So here in Oregon, you have a lower take home pay. And so yes, up in the metropolitan areas, even in Medford has a higher price per square foot than we do. What we have lack of is we have lack of actual inventory. So we have lack of houses. So if it goes back to, or we sideline it to our economic development conversation a little bit earlier, if we get a manufacturing style business here, and they need 250 workers, the problem we have is we might not have 250 houses for them. 250 places for them. But the actual median price of the house is, so you touched on it, goes to the same thing you touched on is Josephine County is one of the poorest paid counties. So people are living on service jobs. The service job was not put in place. When you're 16 years old, the first thing you do is you go out and get a job at McDonald's. That McDonald's job is a stepping stone.
It was always meant to be the stepping stone.
Exactly.
Eddie will show you how to swap the cameras in the right way. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. And then so basically I look at it like, somebody works at McDonald's part-time. They can go buy a house. I mean, you can rob Peter to pay Paul. You can go get an inheritance to do that. You can buy the house, but can you maintain it because you have a viable income to maintain it? So it's all about affordability. So what I do is my premise of looking at how you solve government problems is I'm going to look at it from 16 different angles than you do. And it's not to be that you're not looking. It's just comes from my farming background. My dad's not an expert, but he was a jack of all trades, right? He could jimmy rig anything. And so that's how I learned how to do things. You look at everything. So I'm going to go up onto a problem and everybody's going to be looking at it from the right side. Well, I'm going to go around the left side and the underside and the top side.
With economics, that's inevitable. Everybody has a different approach for it.
And so I look at it like if we can get this community more viable, stronger paying jobs, then this affordable housing, then we're basically just going to be having an inventory problem. We need to start, we're not going to be able to build houses fast enough.
So you don't look at it as like we need to like make more affordable housing, do the ADU thing, the accessory dwelling. I mean, I'm sure that helps, but you're looking at it as more as like, no, let's just get people paid more and then we don't have to worry about it.
Well, and it's like, I don't think the government should be in the business of building houses. I mean, it just goes back to the stereotypical look at the. It's funny. I'm going to go to the rudimentary statement here. Look at one of the old school horror movies. Mm-hmm. Where is all the bad stuff goes? You go to Section 8 housing, and that's where all the murders happen. That's where the bad horror flick is all around is the Section 8 housing. So
if you want murderers, let the government build your housing.
And I don't want to go that simplistic, but basically, if you build something, it goes back to the enabling versus the handout versus the hand up.
Yeah.
If you're giving people fishes and you're not teaching them how to fish, then you're basically just setting them up for failure.
There's a reason that all these phrases have lasted over time. It's because there's a truth to them. You know?
And we shouldn't. But the problem I've seen is, I'm going on 53 years old. Mm-hmm. So I got 50 years in this state, and for most of my lifetime, what I remember, this state, the West Coast, has done nothing but enable people to say, you shouldn't work as hard. You shouldn't work that hard. You shouldn't do that. No. We should. No. The government will help you out. No. Seriously, I spent 18 years in Arizona. Go down to Arizona. It's a different vibe.
Really?
You go down there, people are excited.
Like culturally, they're like...
people are excited to do stuff. People are driven. People are like, we want to make money. We want to get these cars. We want to do these houses, blah, blah, blah. And they get up in the morning and they're passionate to go do something because, they have the drive to do something. You come back to Oregon, it's a little bit different. Everybody's more like, I might have to go to the dispensary before I go home to get my chill pills, and then the government says I get more. What's the new thing where we can get the government's paying you to stay home on some of these maternity leaves, and there's welfare leaves and stuff like that now. So it's like when the government's incentivizing you to stay home, and not work, I think that's detrimental to the prosperity of your community.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why the welfare system has never worked. It's why you have really poor cities where that's implemented. Mm-hmm. It's because, it's encouraging a culture of slothfulness, honestly, Yeah.
There was a study that was done, I watched it on one of the national newses, and it said the top 10 states where the government paid you more money to stay home. Yeah. We were number 7. Oregon was number 7.
Really?
In the top 10 states of basically how much government assistance programs you can get to stay home.
I actually guessed that. I didn't know we were that bad. Yeah.
And it was crazy because when they broke the study down, they're like, if you were smart enough, if you were lucky enough in Oregon to take all the programs you possibly could, you could stay home and pull in $180,000 a year. And not granted that you probably couldn't do all that stuff, but if they basically added up all the programs together and blah, 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 it was about $180,000 to stay home and do nothing. Yeah. I was like,
well, I've obviously been doing this wrong. So
absolutely, me
we're going to talk after the show. You're going to show me how to do that. No. But okay, that's interesting. So on this thread of just kind of developing the economy, what industries do you see as being the most probable to take us out of that poverty position, because I always thought that we had a chance at tourism and helping us. I think it was Ron Smith who I was talking to who said that he maybe didn't think that was as big of a deal. But do you see tourism? Do you see more so just blue collar jobs? Or
no, tourism is big.
Okay,
so we have. You think about it. Most people live here and stay here because it's gorgeous.
Yeah,
the rivers, the mountains. Right now with the snow and the trees, it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful place. The air is clean. It's just awesome, right? So tourism will be very, very big, but if you go to any city in the United States that is baseline or in the world, think about some of these destination places like down in Mexico and stuff. They're based 100% on tourism revenue, but it's seasonal. And so our tourism is going to be seasonal as well because we don't get as many tourists in the wintertime.
Yeah.
We are a summer tourism destination spot because of the rivers, because of the weather, because of the mountains, because of the trees and the leaves and all that stuff. So I don't think when you have an income stream that is seasonal, I don't think you can rely on that 100%.
Yeah.
So I think you would have to, my idea is we're going to have to get back to that manufacturing base, the blue collar base, get something in like that. I was very, very upset when the Amazon distribution center locked into White City. I have a colleague down in Arizona who does commercial development, and he basically has he has his finger on the pulse of all the Amazon distribution centers on the whole West Coast, because he does 90% of them in Arizona. And I said, hey, blah, blah, blah. I was talking to him, and he actually had this Amazon guy with him in this conference call. And he's like, oh, yeah, so-and-so is here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah. I said, can you just tell me, why did you guys go to White City? Why didn't you come to Grants Pass? We got a railroad, we got I-5, blah, blah, blah. I said, and we got tons of people that want to work. And he goes, Grants Pass, where's that?
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like,
just didn't know about it.
Yeah, didn't know about it. And so...
Do you feel Grants Pass is better suited for an Amazon distribution center?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, probably back when you were younger too, that the railroad used to run through here like 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah.
Now it goes through like once a week or something like that.
Actually, we do have a rail going through here. I think maybe twice a day.
Twice a day?
Depending on the day.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And it's usually I don't know what they're carrying. Sometimes it's lumber. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, but I remember going up 6th and 7th Street or whatever, come home from school or whatever, and
you'd have
to stop and everything, and it seems like it comes in at nighttime and stuff. So, but you have those super transportation avenues, and I-5's right there. So I think Amazon Distribution Center would be excellent here.
Yeah.
Not today, because there's one in White City now, but
sure,
something along those lines. I mean, there's opportunities for data centers now, I guess, and call centers. There's call centers for, I think you have a national push to basically bring a lot of jobs back to the states that have been housed out.
Yeah.
So there might be opportunities to get call centers, and those are great because they're kind of centrally located. They're not that big of a space, but you can employ a lot of people in a small building space. I think, we do have minimal style manufacturing. We have cabinetry, we have master brand, we have, I think we have 2 boat builders here. We have metalworking. So there's all kinds of small stuff here, but I think we need something on a grander scale. I would envision maybe the most prime suspect would be in the lumber industry. Bring something back.
One of the questions I was going to ask you is if you see anything, any of the changes happening on the national scale that you could sort of play off of to benefit here in Grants Pass. And lumber might actually be one of them, because I know that some of the talk with tariffs on Canada, I believe we import a lot of lumber from Canada. And if there's some tariffs put on there, then obviously it may become more affordable to get it done here.
I think that would be a great avenue. Lumber would be a prime for here. The problem that we have, I think, in Oregon is the fact that you have so many laws that go up to the state level that are very environmentally driven. Yeah. And they're so environmentally driven that they're a detriment to the actual communities. Yeah. And I think it's sad. And it's kind of like you go back
to the spotted owl and kill the lumber worker.
Well, exactly. And it goes back to the term crusader. Like you want to be this crusader, you want to be this justice person, you want to be this social warrior or environmental warrior, but at the detriment to everybody else. I don't see how you can be so center focused or so blinded focus on that.
It's kind of similar to the homeless problem where you give empathy in one direction. You don't consider the whole thing. And so so that's interesting. I definitely see that on the
and you look at it like
too.
If you want to just do it on basic statistical numbers, I mean, and we'll go into the homeless topic of that. Currently we have, I think we're going to go up on maybe 250 people that are out on the streets that we
in Grants Pass City. In
Grants Pass City, that basically if we were to go, hey, we've counted the people that have been the tent people here and this, that, and the other thing. UCAN just did a point in time count, but they haven't published it yet. So we're going to have some more definition a little bit later. But I think there's been thrown around like, there's 6,000. That's BS. There's not 6,000 here. But so even if you were generous and say, okay, we're up to 300 or 350. What's the population here right now? 37,000, 38,000? That's still a minority, a small percentage. So yet, are we supposed to, are the 37,000 people in the city, and then not even counting all the tax base in the community, supposed to pay for 200 people?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of when
it does put it in perspective.
You have to look at it and if you want to say that's harsh and cruel, I'm sorry, okay, you can say that. I'm looking at it for logistics. I take on a position as mayor, as a local government official, as a steward of the taxpayer's dollar. Yeah. And I can't justify expending more taxpayer dollar
Yeah.
just to support that.
Well, and also, if you want to talk about harsh and cruel, like I think I read a quote from Indra, one of the council members, where she was saying, like, it's cruel to have them in these camps. You should see the living conditions. This is not healthy. And like one of the views that I've taken on homelessness, and I'm looking forward to this topic because I feel like you're gonna have a lot of insight on it that we haven't been able to touch on. But one of my views on homelessness is that I would like them out of that condition. That's
Absolutely.
the only thing I'm interested in, because there's no quality of life that they're doing there. And so, I had this sort of like, I guess controversial stance, whereas like, I don't really support making homelessness more comfortable because I want people to be out of homelessness. The example I gave on like our last show was, if you're in a pit, I don't just want to give you a blanket and some water in the pit. I want you out of the pit,
Exactly.
And so the more comfortable I make you, the less incentive there's going to be to get out of there. So that's sort of my view on homelessness. And in that way, I think there is some compassion in there. It's just that people don't view it that way,
No, and it is. And I mean, the word always gets thrown around, enabling.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, I mean, bring it back to one of the major elements of homelessness is what we're talking about is drug addiction, is addiction, period. Right.
Yeah.
And
I think one of the stats we read, and I think it's way higher than this, but it was like 1/3 of homelessness people.
Well, it's kind of crazy because you talk to one nonprofit and they're going to tell you 1/3. You talk to another nonprofit like that deals with drug addiction, they're going to tell you 65%. And you talk to the police department, they're going to say 75%. So it is anywhere from 75% to 35%.
Yeah.
So it's
and also some of this might be based off of just asking, just taking a poll. And so who's going to be honest? You don't know who's going to be honest.
Well, and the crazy part is to this date, I think society has been so sheltered or maybe so shy to say, why can't we go to these people and ask them?
Yeah.
Why can't we go to these people and document them and say, hey, you know what? You're residing on public land. Mm-hmm. If you were at Boatnick, and there was a controversy between you and your friend, the police department is going to come up to you and talk to you, and they're going to get your ID immediately, right? Mm-hmm. So you're on public land. I know there's a lot of laws around this because I've actually talked to the chief of police. It's like, we can't go up to them and basically ask for ID and do this. There's something about a profiling law that's
really?
In place in Oregon. And it kind of revolves around the fact that the police department can't actually pull you over for a broken taillight anymore or expired tags because they call it profiling. And so it's based on an Oregon law, and I don't know exactly what it is, but the chief was kind of telling me about
profiling. What? Driving with a broken headlight?
Well, basically what it is that person gets pulled over, and then they argue that that cop profiled them because you might not have been whatever.
Yeah.
You could fill in all the blanks there. So
they did it because I'm white. I get pulled over all the time for being white.
Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
And because the lady cops want to flirt with me, I guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I know
I know what you mean.
I'm not modest. I'm good looking. I tell my kids, I'm like, your mom and dad are good looking.
Signs. I was like, I'd vote just for that hairstyle.
Yeah, exactly. I tell my kids, I'm like, you were blessed because you're good looking.
Yeah. That's
I said,
awesome,
use
man.
it to your advantage. But
yeah,
no, it's there's a lot to go on with our homeless situation. I believe we're probably at the 50%, 65% range of that have a drug addiction problem.
Okay.
So if you break it down
to consistent with what I just see out there.
And I mean, if back in the day when I was in college and everything, my mom thought I drank too much in college, so she made me go to an AA meeting. Right?
Really?
Yeah. So, and you go to an AA meeting, they're going to give you their AA Bible. Right?
Yeah.
And you read this little thing, and the first thing it says is like, if you don't want to drink, don't go into a bar. So it's the same thing. If you don't want those people to do drugs, then why are we? I mean, there's that whole compassion issue. Why are we giving them Narcan? Why are we giving them needles? Why are we giving them this stuff?
Yeah.
Yes, I think if somebody's at a certain point that you should save their life. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But
to distribute needles to them to do this, and there's a point.
Does that go on in Grants Pass? Has that gone on?
Absolutely.
In Grants Pass? Really?
Absolutely. That's one reason why the previous council tried to do that resolution where they wanted to document nonprofits going into the parks and distributing things, because then they could tell who was going in and doing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And basically, if you watch the Facebook for the park watch people. They go. There's these park watch people that go and clean up the parks all the time, and they post in their Facebook all the time of how much they clean up. And the biggest thing that we're finding in the parks is tinfoil and needles.
Yeah.
And which is not safe for anybody.
No.
And so there is a point where we have to say, well, we need to kind of pull back the enabling part, and we need to start giving them the hand up instead of a handout.
So how are you guys as the counselors and mayor doing that?
So at this point, what we were trying to do, and what I think myself, and I'm not going to speak for the other counselors, but I believe that they were on the same page, the four new counselors that came in, is we didn't want to target homeless. Nobody wants to target homeless. But what we wanted to do is we saw that there was a lot of bad actors there. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of drug dealers. There was a lot of drug people. We wanted to start making it harder for them people, the bad actors, to just do what they wanted to do. And so if you put a little more pressure on them, have a little bit more accountability, maybe we could flush out some of the bad actors, and then you can actually see the people in our community that were homeless that really needed help. Because there are people out there that really need help. And one of the big things that happened when we closed J Street down, J Street was a mess. Everybody said it was a mess. Everybody agrees that it was a mess.
Yeah. Because we had someone who works as a friend who works as a public service officer or something like that. And she was like, I don't even want to talk about what we found there. You know,
it's crazy. Yeah. Basically, they got to the point where they had to stop the physical cleanup, and they had to take heavy equipment in there because it was unsafe for people because there was so much needles and stuff and all that stuff. But basically, what we saw is we put the public notice out on the J Street camp saying it's going to be closed at this certain time. And I actually I personally worked with the town manager and the chief of police and the chief of fire and said, how long would it take? You guys, they closed down the A Street one previously, and the chief of police said, I need this much time because we are compassionate. We go in there and we help them. We notice them. We gently nudge them along. We are compassionate 1,000%. And we don't pull the rug out from underneath them. So he said, basically, we went from, the council voted it on the 7th, and we gave them till the 24th.
So that's interesting because I had read, I think it was a Courier article where it made it sound like they got kicked out overnight or something like that. And then I later found out that it was no, they had weeks warning to clean all this stuff up. There's that photo of some girl surrounded by all this stuff. It's didn't you guys have a couple weeks or
So basically, and that was under the advice of legal counsel, the chief of police, the chief of fire, because they knew what they needed to do. The chief of police basically said, I know what my people can do. I know how my people are going to work, and I'm not going to let them do anything faster or anything worse because we are going to go in there with compassion. Yeah. And because they have to...
Well, good for him for kind of giving that side of it.
They have to live with these people. They're the ones that are interacting with them on a nightly basis, on a daily basis and stuff. So... Granted, so how many ever days we give them, it was a couple weeks or whatever. Once we noticed them, so we put the official notice on there, we lost, it was 3 days later, the chief of police came and spoke to us, and he's like, we lost 25% of the population already.
Interesting.
And we're like, okay. And he said, yes, this goes along with some of the national studies that are saying 25% of the people that are embedded in these homeless camps are the people that are just there to do bad things, to do drugs, that they might even have their own home. But basically they're in that culture. It's that street culture of being access to the drugs, access to those people.
Wow.
So we lost that 25% within a couple days. By the time we got to the 24th, we had lost another 10% of the population of that camp. And so that 10%, I was kind of going, okay, hey, is that the 10% of people that had warrants, maybe didn't want to be involved with the police? Maybe were kind of skirting the law a little bit and kind of wanted to get out. And granted, they might have got out into the woods or whatever, but I kind of believe there's a lot of people that got on the I-5 and left.
Yeah.
Even the Daily Courier did an article. and they interviewed a couple people, and I think there was 2 people on there. One said, "Yeah, I'm going to go back down to California," and the other lady said, "I'm going to go back to Arizona."
I was going to say this is anecdotal, but our studio here is right next to the train tracks, and I actually just have homeless people all the time. I think someone tried to do a campfire out there that I didn't clean up yet. So sorry for the eyesore there, Mr. Mayor. But we have like people walking through all the time, you know, and I was seeing like new faces and stuff, you know, and I was seeing people who. I think maybe even someone came into my shop and they were from out of town or whatever. So I was feeling like this encouragement of these campsites and stuff was definitely, you know, people hear about it through the grapevine and they're like, oh, you could stay in Grants Pass, and then people end up staying. So yeah, you get people who aren't even from here.
Well, think about that. Let's go back to the last 6 years. You had a state that allowed you to do class 5 drugs in a small, you could possess it in a small amount, you could have the paraphernalia, you can openly do it without getting anything harmed, right? And then you've got a city that's a crown jewel of the West Coast that has more parkland than it does per capita than any other city. So we actually have more parks than any other city in Oregon.
Yeah.
And gorgeous. And why wouldn't you say there's a neon sign on I-5 that says, come do your drugs and live in these beautiful parks? Yeah. That's what I felt's happened for the last 5 years, 6 years.
So what do you think are, first of all, the negative impacts of allowing the homelessness to continue in the way it has? And then also, what are the positive changes? Kind of the same question, but what are the positive changes that you're expecting to see with the new changes you guys are implementing?
So basically, what myself and some of the new counselors that came in, our premise was, like I said, to crack down on some of the bad stuff, because everybody in the community wants to crack down on the drugs. Everybody in the community wants to get rid of some of the drug dealers. They want to it takes away the petty theft. It takes away a lot of lawlessness. It's like crack down on the bad actors. So those people that really need the help can come out of the shadows and we can actually really help them. I mean, what happens, like say your grandma can't live on Social Security anymore and she's got to go to one of these parks, but she's off in the corner because she's not doing the drugs. She's not doing that. She's got to hide in the corner just to be safe. So you take some of the bad actors away, and then these people come out that really are from our community that really need the help. And then we can use those resources that are prevalently available. I mean, these are federal taxpayer dollars, state taxpayer dollars that all these nonprofits are using.
Yeah.
U-Turn for Christ and Gospel Rescue Mission are the only organizations in this town that are privately funded that do not take federal taxpayer or local taxpayer dollars.
Interesting.
So they are both faith-based, which is kind of not so acceptable to people that on certain circles and everything, but realistically, I'm just like, sometimes you have to have a come to Jesus moment, you know? Maybe that's gonna be what it takes you to get you out of the gutter.
Well, I think that we might be, because I had talked about this before, we might be interviewing Brian Boteller, I think is the owner of the Gospel Rescue Mission.
Oh, he's awesome.
And I was hoping that we'd be able to do kind of a tour of his facility as the interview, do something like that. But the reason I wanted to interview him is because he would be like a high barrier to entry shelter, you know, because it doesn't allow drugs, drinking, that sort of thing. The reason that he expressed for that is because it has the highest turnaround rate of actually getting out of homelessness,
absolutely.
You know? And so, you know, we criticize it because, you know, it's kind of more exclusive, but the turnaround rate is a lot higher. And so in a way, I think that's at least moving in the right direction.
Yeah, well, his
for that.
success
you know,
metric is way higher than anybody else.
Right, yeah.
And it's because it's basically just goes back to that term that we keep saying. It's enabling.
Yeah.
Are we going to continue to do low barrier shelters to enable these people to stay in the rut that they're in?
Is my understanding of the Mint program accurate, that it's maybe a little more low barrier to entry?
So currently the Mint was started as, and I might not be 100% educated on this, but this is kind of what I know. Mint was started as kind of a medical group that was going out into the camps and into the parks and helping people, medically helping people. Yeah. And I believe the foundation is...
I don't even remember what the acronym stands for. Do you remember?
It's I know it's something about mobile integration, something blah blah blah.
Luke will look it up.
It has something about mobile integration.
And
you know, so they've done some pretty good stuff in the community. One of the only organizations that's kind of really stepped up and done stuff. But basically, they took on the Parker's Place over by Weimar, and they started a warming shelter, cooling shelter. So basically, it's inclement weather shelter.
I've always been curious about how those work. Is it Is it just a big room with cots in it? Like,
Absolutely.
Oh, really? Okay.
So basically what it is it's a meeting hall. So for people to come in out of the heat or the cool.
Yeah.
And then I think you can get coffee, donuts, kind of stuff like that, and their medical staff is going to be there to assess people. If, like, for example, this time of year would be a warming shelter. So they could service so many people, but when they close the doors at night, they can only house so many people.
Okay.
So they might be able to service 75 people during the day, but at nighttime they can only house like 49 people. I think that's the limit that they have their use permit for. So you have to get a use permit for that. Basically means that they're going to be operating that as a temporary basis during inclement weather conditions, meaning at wintertime it has to be below freezing. There's a certain temperature barrier. So it has to get to that temperature barrier before they can stay open. It was kind of one of the crazy parts because a couple weeks ago or a week ago, they actually had to shut down because we even had snow on the ground, but it wasn't cold enough.
Interesting.
And then so social media was out there kind of blaming the city going,
Sure.
I'm like, no, we had nothing to do with it. This is state law. This is like state regulations.
Yeah.
And with that being a temporary shelter, there's a lot of things that they can bypass, like meaning the building doesn't have to be up to fire code to certain aspects and stuff. Because basically it's a kind of full circle onto what happened with the new council coming in is the old council Mint had solicited the old council and said, hey, we want to buy this building. And the old council said, hey, we'll grant you, basically we're going to loan you money in a grant form. And so basically if you meet all this criteria, then you don't have to pay it back.
Was this from, it wasn't recent, it was I think January 7th or something, but that council meeting where they turned down the funding for the Mint?
Correct.
Okay.
So basically in December, the previous council had put this grant together, which was basically a loan from the city to Mint to said blah, blah, blah. Written in that legal document, it said that the council would have to approve the inspections because we all knew this is a 1940s or 1930s building, and so it's not up to code, it's not up to anything, and so basically, written in this legal document that the previous councils approved was that the city had to approve the building inspections, and they had to get full building inspections, blah 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 blah. And the reason that what they're doing is currently Mint is leasing this from Old Man Parker, who's originally
okay, yeah.
And he wants to retire and wants to sell the building, so he doesn't want to lease it anymore. So what happened was come January, when the new council came in, this building inspection came out, and the building inspection was horrifying. It was absolutely horrifying.
Huh.
And then, I actually did a lot of research because, again,
1940s probably had aluminum wires in there, big old fire hazard. No,
yeah, and it's like, I'm a civil engineer by trade, so I know everything about buildings and everything, and I know a lot about fire code and everything.
Yeah.
So realistically, I consulted with Justin Gerlich, who was one of the civil engineers here in town. And he's like, I've only toured the building so much, blah, blah, blah. I said, hey, down in Arizona, if I was to do a building like that, a sprinkler system would cost like X amount of dollars. Justin says, yeah, in Oregon, one of those buildings would cost $150,000 to put a sprinkler system in. There's 2 buildings. Wow. So you're talking about like $300,000 to $400,000 just to put sprinkler systems, which would be mandatory for you to do that. Then you come into, you're entering these properties off of a state highway. 6th Street is actually Highway 99. It's a state highway. From the top, from I-5 all the way down to the bridge, all the way down through. It's a highway.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's actually ODOT land. And so fire code says that emergency vehicles, whether it's a fire, police, or an ambulance, cannot back out onto a road, let alone back out onto a state highway. So they would have had to provide a turnaround for a fire truck and or an ambulance, which there's no land for that because the buildings sit on zero.
Gosh, is there a reason for that rule? Because that sounds like a silly rule in my opinion,
Well, it's just basically comes down to is when you put all the nuts
Can
in
they
the
not
basket,
just put a rear view camera on the truck? Like, come on, there's got to be another solution.
Oh yeah, that goes up to the federal, because fire code is basically, it's a federal mandate, and most states have a little leeway in the fire code, but it's federally mandated on fire code. But the whole thing is like I just didn't see a path for that to even meet fire code whatsoever, and they would have had to dump a crap load of money into. They would have had to put $500,000 into those buildings just to bring them up.
You felt like the project was kind of a no-go. Is that kind of how the rest of the council felt too?
Basically, what the council voted on, which has been misled within the press, is the council voted not to approve the building inspection. So, and that's what was written in the legal form, the legal document for this grant, was the council had the last say on a building inspection. So if the council looked at the inspection report and said, there's no way, this is just crap, then basically on January 7th, in that special meeting, the new council voted not to approve the building inspection, which basically null and voided the whole grant.
Yeah, just kind of shut
so
down.
We didn't take, so that council did not take away the money. They just didn't approve the building, which basically took the money away.
Yeah.
So
and you think that was the right call too? You think it was just going to be kind of putting money into it when it wasn't going to happen?
Yeah, okay. I truly believe it, and that's my professional opinion as well as my community and my.
Did you offer a solution to Mint or any kind of other options for them to play with?
Well, what we did is like me personally, I had conversations with Cassie, the one lady that runs it, and I told her, I'm like, I said, I don't ever see this building happening, so if you guys want something, you're going to have to work with council, and we're going to have to do something. I think Mint's done a fairly decent job. Mm-hmm. They're one of the organizations that stepped up. I think they've got some faults. I think the community has a bit different opinion of them now since we have a new lawsuit. It's been traced back that one of their executive directors was the spearhead of the new lawsuit. So,
really?
Yeah.
Could you remind me which lawsuit we're talking about here?
So there's a current lawsuit from the American Disabilities Act people.
Okay.
That basically says that it was a lawsuit against the city that we are discriminating against handicapped people or disabled people by not providing them handicap accessible areas within these camps that we have them in. And then it also
well, you fixed that problem. You just got rid of the camps,
Well, and then they also piggybacked it with the so they're citing ADA code, saying that whatever camps and wherever we're allowing them to camp is not ADA accessible. Mm-hmm. Within this lawsuit, they basically said, so take one step back. ADA criteria, ADA regulations is a national... This is the
disability regulations.
Disability regulations is a national regulation. Each state has a modified version.
This is stuff like you have to have a ramp up to your store, like that sort of thing.
How tall your
bigger
sinks
bathroom.
Where your bars are.
Have those little slide out tables for writing checks on,
Exactly, all that stuff. So there is a federal rule book. And then each state has their modified rule book. So basically the lawsuit says we are defending this underneath the Oregon ADA standards. So what that does is make this lawsuit stay within the state of Oregon. So this lawsuit can never go federal.
Is that a benefit to the city council? Because
no, I think it's a target. I think it's a state target against the city.
Huh. Interesting. How does the state's ADA regulations differ from the nation's or whatever?
Not very much at all.
Okay.
Not very much at all. So basically it would be like, you've got to have, for example, if you were to do a commercial building with federal jurisdictions, you have to have 3 handicap parking spots per so many offices. Oregon's may say, well, you have to have 3 instead of 2.
Okay.
That's the difference, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably very minute, small changes. But the problem...
Well, typically the rule for national laws is that the state law can be a little more but can't be less or something. Isn't that usually how it goes?
Basically that. But I think it's been engineered in this... I personally think it's been engineered in this new lawsuit to keep it within the state level, because the fact that the last lawsuit, we were able to go all the way up to the federal court, and we went to the highest court in land and got it turned over. So this new lawsuit basically targets Oregon law and Oregon ADA standards. So you cannot go out. Basically, it's going to be very hard for even us to go outside the Josephine County court system without a long time period.
So, like, what was Mint doing here? What was their motivation to bring a lawsuit?
I have the acronym definition, by the way.
Oh, you got the Mint thing?
Mobile Integrative Navigation Team.
Correct.
Cool. Mobile Integrative Navigation.
No,
just one of those acronyms that feels like it means nothing. I'm sure they had some reason behind it. Like, okay, all right. They just wanted to say mint. They thought it sounded cool.
Well, I think
we're getting this town in mint condition, you know?
I think it's just, you put the acronym together. But what I do have to clarify, so Mint did not bring the lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
But I believe
Sorry, Mint.
they kind of had a hand in it, I think, and basically because let me see, I kind of wrote some stuff down here. So in August of 2024, Dr. Murray, who's supposedly the executive director of Mint, or used to be the executive director of Mint, he started complaining to the council in August of 2024, in person and in letter form, and saying that we were discriminated against these. We needed to provide, basically it was like, if you have
he started writing complaints to the council directly?
Correct, the previous council. And it's if you are disabled, it's intentionally cruel to make them move. Right? So state law says that if you're camping and we notice that you need to move, then you got 72 hours to move, right? That's the state law now. So in August 2024, Dr. Murray started complaining to the previous council. Then October of 2024, the American Disabilities Act actually wrote an official letter to the previous council and said, we're giving you 90 days. We're giving you 90 days.
So they just picked it up because they heard about it or because they were in touch with Mint or something?
Exactly.
Okay.
Like it could be coincidental, it could be whatever. But when you actually run through the timeline, it's a little suspicious. So then so you're talking August to October, and then December is when Mint basically in the previous city council came to an agreement to give them money to buy the Parker's building. And you can read whatever you want into that one. And then in January, when you have a new council, then the American Disabilities Act people basically filed an official lawsuit with the Josephine County
and the
judicial system.
The premise of the lawsuit was that these encampments, you weren't providing like wheelchair accessibility and stuff?
Yeah, in the lawsuit, I'm not to quote it or whatever, but basically the premise of it was that these sites that the previous council had set up on 7th Street and then J Street were gravel lots, and that was not maneuverable by not properly maneuverable by a wheelchair person. As well as the main premise was, if you were telling the people in J Street that you could only be there 7 days, and then you had to go to the other one in 7 days, the
constant moving
was the biggest premise of it. So in the lawsuit, they're stating ADA regulations for the state of Arizona, which basically keeps it here in the state of Oregon. Sorry. And then as well, they're citing the Oregon law SB 3115, which basically says if a governing body is to enforce a no camping or distributing homeless people in a certain direction, they have to have objectable, reasonable time, place, and manner for them to go. And so those two arguments basically tailor this lawsuit completely to stay within the umbrella of the state of Oregon.
Oh, so they were very intentional with that.
It's very, very intentional.
So are you worried about it? Do you think they're going to get anything from it? Or are you confident with your legal team or whatever?
So basically what they did is they filed the lawsuit, and then...
are you worried is what I'm asking?
Yes and no.
Okay.
We are working on a game plan. So basically what they did is upon filing the lawsuit, then they put a temporary injunction on the city and said, you can't for 10 days, you can't enforce any no camping law. So that's why you're seeing the tents where they are in all the places.
Did they go back to the parks?
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. So just driving here, just before I came to you, there's that little tiny triangle piece of park, Kelsey Park, right across from the Mini PetSmart. I think there's 2 tents in there right now.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we have 10 days to kind of work with that. We're working with our legal team who's working with the other legal team. And so basically what the council is doing is we're actually having a meeting, I believe, having an executive session meeting to speak with our legal team on Monday to talk about options on what we can do and what we can't do and stuff like that. So
when's that 10 days up? When are you allowed to start kicking people off parks again?
So basically we're given 10 days. Part of this injunction is what they're talking about. And I might not be using the right terminology for injunction. I can't remember what they called it.
Sure.
But I don't know exactly when the clock starts. I believe it was when they filed it, which would have been Wednesday or Thursday or something like that. So you'd have 10 days from that point, but it wouldn't just dissolve. It would probably basically, if we did nothing as a city organization, they could probably just go back to the judge and say, these guys aren't playing ball. These guys aren't doing anything. So maybe we make this indefinite. So we're scrambling on our side in an efficient manner to try to come up with something. And I think what it's going to come down to is push comes to shove is we're going to end up probably having to find some place that we could do that's big enough to house a lot of people. And basically our intention is to whatever we do as a local government is to solely rely and 100% rely on the nonprofits in the area and the community organizations. Yeah. That's why we've been collating them together. That's why we've been coordinating with them to get them to run it. Yeah. And to operate it and do that stuff.
Well, I definitely think that's the right attitude, is to create some sort of unity between these organizations, because it seems as if homelessness is one of those things where everybody has a different view on how to handle it, and it kind of creates that it just makes it hard to get things done.
Well, I think everybody's got their own idea on how you should address it and how you should fix it. Yeah. And everybody keeps saying, well, the terminology "fix it," I think is we need to stop. We need to stop using that, because I don't think I don't feel that local government or any government should fix or solve social problems. This is a social problem.
Well, you want to know something? It's what we were talking at the beginning of the episode about how when you fix the economy, you fix a lot of things. Because when you have a healthy, profitable community,
absolutely,
there's more room for. There's more funding for the mints and for the gospel rescue missions and the U-turns for Christ and stuff. And then, that's kind of, in my opinion, that's kind of how it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be charity work that takes care of these people.
The community should support the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, think about it. You go back to, and I hate to use the terminology, I want to go back to the olden days or whatever. But it used to, every community was community driven. Yeah. It was community supported. Yeah. And so basically, you didn't, back in the days, you didn't rely on the government for nothing.
No.
Realistically, the government should be there to...
Roads, police, and firemen, that's all,
infrastructure,
military, I guess.
And they should... And I take it on as a representative of local government, I should protect and uphold community safety. Yeah. Make it a prosperous place and give opportunities for economic growth. Yeah. That's basically the two premises. That's it.
Oh, that if you take care of that, like you're saying, everything else
everybody and like we've got 70 plus churches in this area. You've got
I didn't know that.
You've got just shy of 80 nonprofit organizations registered in the blanket of Grants Pass. So you have so many community organizations. And that's not even counting like the Lions Club or the Kiwanis or any of that stuff, right? Yeah. Or the Active Club. It's like everybody, there's so many community aspects or community organizations that can help and come up. But the problem is I think a lot of people have been in the shadows. Specifically, I'm gonna tout and promote U-Turn for Christ, because they stepped up when the council shut down J Street. They came out of the shadows, and they'd kind of been in the shadows. They've been doing this for many,
Batman of homeless shelters.
Yeah. And they basically came out and said, "Okay, you know what? We see a problem. We've got a solution. Blah 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 blah." And now they're spearheading the collation of all the organizations. They just had a big luncheon and kind of like a lunch and learn today, where all the nonprofits got together. I think Chris Barnett was there. We had a couple counselors there, and it was like pulling everybody together and saying,
That's brilliant.
We need to lock arms and we need to work together.
Absolutely.
And the city did the same thing
that
just
must have
on
been
Monday.
very encouraging to see,
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It was crazy because the city actually did, as a council, we did that same thing with a few of them. So we had Gospel Rescue Mission, Hearts with a Mission, we had Mint, we had On Track, we had Options, we had You Can, and then we had U-Turn for Christ.
Okay.
All in a panel in front of the council, and basically it was an informational session.
Yeah.
And we're like, what can you do? What do you do? What's your metrics of success? Blah, 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 blah. So it was kind of a learning session. And the biggest thing that I got out of that was I saw these people. So there was a head representation from all these organizations, and they were there to speak for that organization. And I got out of it as like, yeah, we kind of work together, but we got so much more in common. Like they were at the end of the session, they were all looking at each other, shaking hands. Like it was
amazing what it can do just to get everyone in a room and get them talking, you know?
And I champion that as being, that's what I signed up to do, is to be a collaborator.
Yeah.
A collaborator and a coordinator. And I think that that Monday's workshop was just exactly why I signed up to do this job.
Absolutely.
It's like, because I wanted to bring everybody together, and we walked out of there. They were shaking hands and patting each other on the back and conversating all the way out the door.
Yeah.
Exchanging cards. And then again, U-Turn for Christ did a big thing today, and he did the same thing, brought everybody together, and it was more of like a come to Jesus moment. We've been talking about it, but now we're going to do something.
Yeah.
And so I can't champion them enough, because they're stepping up, and they're like, we got this, but we have a tough love policy. They have a tough love policy, which maybe that's what we need nowadays.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need. We need a little bit of accountability.
I think we need a lot more of the tough love than we do of the enablement. So I think that's definitely the right attitude. Well, I'm glad to see you guys are so motivated on this topic. I mean, just the energy you're expressing about it now gives me a lot of encouragement for some things that we're going to see in the future. We're coming up on our time. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about or let the people know about?
No, the one big thing I do want to kind of reach out to the community about is, if you feel like, as a community, I kind of already done this with some of the business leaders in town and some of the community people that I'm invested in. I'm like, you need to step up. People need to step up. If you feel that the council's doing a good job, if you support the council, we have more negative people come up and yell and scream at us. Yeah. We have more negative people in social media that just beat everybody up. And it's like, if you feel and you have convictions that this is the right direction that you want your community to go, I think the positive people need to start voicing their opinions. Yeah. We need to get more positive support, because I think...
Well, I'm going to come in and voice my Ice Cream Wednesdays idea, so you're going to see me in there next week. No, just kidding.
No, I love it. I think that's great, and we can do all kinds of stuff like that. So, but yeah, like what all I can do is encourage the community to support the community.
Yeah.
Like, if you feel that people are doing the right thing, because like I said, if you think most people that are in support of what's going on or whatever, they kind of like, they step in the background and all that stuff. It kind of goes back to the national level. You've had, for the last 8 years, we've had nothing but a small minority coming up and, complaining and nagging and bullying people. And then all of a sudden, you want to call it a red wave or whatever.
Sure.
You got a lot of conservative people came up and said, we're done. Society came up as a whole and said, we're done being bullied. We're done. Like, we need to stand up.
We described it as it's like dad came home and it's like, okay, enough of this BS,
And I think that's what we need to. We need to keep that on the community level as well. Because if you have a passion and a love for this community, get involved. And it's like, you don't have to give too much time. If you had 5 minutes to put a post on social media or write the council a message or tell your friends and neighbors, like, they're doing a great job. They're doing a great job. Or even if you got any ideas and stuff. And it's going to bring it back full circle, because basically I ran for this office saying that I want to collaborate with the community. And so, yes, the council cut away like 3 or 4 committees in the very first session they did, because we felt that they were I was behind them 1%, because even though I didn't vote, because I don't vote, but I was in favor of getting rid of some of these committees because they weren't doing a good thing. So my biggest thing is we're going to be starting a new committee, and this committee is actually going to be comprised of builders, developers, real estate people, business people.
Is it paid $25,000? Because I'll join it if it pays $25,000.
No, it's going to be volunteer, but basically we're going to get the people that is in the heart of the building industry and I'm going to get them put together in a committee. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give them the building and development code. And I'm going to say, you got a year. And you guys are going to rip through this, and we're going to mold it.
My brother is a contractor. He's fist pumping in the background.
No, because realistically, if you're going to go on this topic of affordable housing, one of the biggest complaints, your brother can probably attest to this, is the fact that the development code is so cumbersome and such a pain in the butt. So let's do it. Let's take the community. We'll get a group of people from the community that's in this industry and say, here, rip apart this code and tell us what you think would make it better.
Yeah.
And if we come out on the back end of it going, it's much easier to build a house and we can build 3 houses instead of 1 in a year.
Yeah.
How much better would that be for our economy and everything?
That one little thing there, the support of the city towards the community for development and just encouraging that sort of thing, helping with regulations and that sort of thing, cutting red tape, that can have such a huge impact. And like one of the questions that I've been asking myself a lot, especially since we started this podcast and I started like talking to some of the commissioners and local community leaders and stuff, is I was very curious on what can you do on a local level to increase wealth, increase prosperity, and just kind of change your community. And the reason that I'm interested in that is because I really believe in this sort of infectious disease approach where like, that's probably not the most poetic description I could give. But what I mean is that when you start developing and growing and getting some of these rid of some of these regulations that are not helpful, getting rid of the things that are not helping us grow, when that prosperity comes in, I think it has this infectious effect, you know, where who knows where that could stop. And, you know, it starts to grow statewide and you start to do all this great stuff. So I'm very curious in what we can do on a local level. Let's see how prosperous we can get grants passed. Let's see how prosperous we can get Josephine County. And, you know, sky's the limit from there.
Well, and you look at it, just go back to the human nature. If you're happier, that's the whole thing is if you got a good job, you got a nice roof over your head, you're going to be a happy person.
Absolutely.
Because there's some so angry many people here. And it's like, you live in such a beautiful community, a beautiful environment. It's like, why aren't we happy? And so if I can do anything but just make it a little easier for people to develop and a little easier for them to get a better job and make them happy, I'll die happy.
Absolutely.
Myself. Yeah.
That's perfect. Well, you know, keep getting out there with that Clint Scherf winning mayor smile and that beautiful haircut. What pomade are you using? I'll ask you after the show.
It's a paste, baby. Yep.
Okay. You have to send me that Amazon link.
There you go.
I'm getting that.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Clint. I appreciate it so much.
No problem.